So it's that time of the year when all roads lead to Prayagraj, to the Sangam, where the Maha Kumbh is happening. It's the first time in almost 144 years, is what we're being told. But it's also an interesting time in the world. Geopolitics, you have Donald Trump, who's come into the office in the United States, and he's, of course, threatening to upend everything that we know in geopolitics. We have an interesting time, whether it's in the U.S., whether it's in America, whether it's in Europe, and of course here in Asia, which of course is the fastest growing part of the world. How does India sort of meander its way around this world where geopolitics is really, from week to week it's changing? Somebody who knows a thing or two about that is Erik Solheim, former Norwegian diplomat, minister in the government. Thank you very much for joining us here on CNN News 18. You've just come back from Prayagraj. You've gone there for the Maha Kumbh, first time in a century. You've had the holy dip. What was that experience like?
It was a once in a lifetime experience. I mean, the enormity of the crowd, the feelings, the emotions, the closeness to the history of India, to the Dharma. It was an experience as no other, because it was sad that a few people died the day of the stampede. It was very close to where I was also. But except for that, it was a fantastic experience. And as my daughter said, I mean, next time is 144 years. And she said, Father, you may not be around at that time.
Yeah. She may be right about that. But what is it that drew you to the philosophy of Hinduism? And what is it that attracted you to Sanatan Dharma?
I think there are two aspects of Hinduism which is very attractive to me and also looks very modern in our age. One is the tolerance. If Jesus Christ had been born in India, I'm sure he would have been co-opted in the Hindu panorama as one of the many gods. And there have been no quarrel about the dogmas. Look, we Christians, we were killing each other for the smallest variation of the dogma. People, things with absolutely no significance for people, like, say, the nature of Christ. People were killing each other in large numbers. There's nothing like that in Hinduism. That's very appealing. And the other is the idea of oneness, which is very strong in Hindu Dharma. Nature and humans are one. Humans are not above nature. We cannot kill animals or destroy forests just at will. We are one with nature. And it's symbolized in the fact that the old ancient Indians even made God half animal, half human, like Ganesh, half elephant, half human, Hanuman, half monkey, half human. And the very, very, very strong emphasis on nature and the oneness with nature which is there.
But how do you square what Hinduism believes in, which is renouncing everything that is material in the world, renouncing, worldly pleasures, and seeking, in a sense, moksha, which is, eternal life, with what is going around us in the modern day world, which is very materialistic, which is all about ambition and buying stuff to materially satisfy you. Is it relevant, and how do you square those two things?
I think it's very relevant because you need a counterweight. It's not like we should all leave the material aspiration and leave. I mean, most people cannot leave the life of a monk, and we do not want to go back to the time when most people and nearly all people were poor. We want prosperity for everyone, and that comes with the material improvement of conditions and with industrialism, with modernity, with internet and artificial intelligence. Without that modernity, every nation is doomed. But what's happening in India now, I think, is very interesting and very positive. And in fact, it's largely the same which the Japanese and the Chinese and the Koreans and others have done. That is, yes, we want to go modern. We really want to improve our lives, but we want to root it in the old histories of our nation, which of course is the Hindu Dharma.
So in India's context, what would that be? Like, we've been under colonial rule for 300 years, post-independence now for 75 years. What is this yearning? What is this need to be rooted in who we are and what we are from thousands of years ago?
Look, the Brits largely trampled upon everything which was there to India, which was really Indian history, because they could not argue that they needed to civilize the Indians unless they were superior. So they claimed that Christianity was absolutely superior to Hindu Dharma, and that the whites were absolutely superior to the brown. That was the argument for imperialism. If they had said that, historically, India has been a much more civilized place than Europe, it has been superior to Europe in most of history, they could not have argued for the civilization mission. Even if they had accepted that India was similar or equal to Europe, they could not have argued. So they trample upon this, and that's why it's so essential, in my view, for India to restore the strength and symbols and religious ideas of all India, and bring them up as a strong basis for the modern future. But of course, it cannot stop the economic and technological development. If it does that, India will remain in poverty.
So let me come to modern day India. You've been coming to India since the 1980s, 70s?
First time I was here is very easy to track, because it was just after Indira Gandhi was murdered. So it was in 1984.
84.
That's why I remember it so well. Yeah.
Wow. So the first time you came, and now, 30, 40 years later, how do you see the difference in this country?
Let me be very honest with you. I mean, when I came first time, I was absolutely overwhelmed with the poverty, because I came from Northern Europe, which, because the time was very developed and where there were little poverty, and so wherever I went, there were often hundreds of kids trying to get something, and there was, I remember coming to Kanpur at the time, of course there was hardly any car there. It may have been 50,000 bicycle rickshaws. There were even at the time the rickshaws in Kolkata, where the man was the driver and man as the horse. So it was a completely different India. Obviously there's still poverty in states like Bihar or Jharkhand or UP, and all over India there are still people who definitely deserve to be uplifted, but it's a completely different India. Much more modern, with a large middle class, with aspirations everywhere, and of course where every Indian child should be educated to such a level that they can really live up to all these opportunities.
Can you specifically sort of identify 2 or 3 areas, particularly in the last 10 years, that you've seen where there is a stark difference?
One which is very visible for a traveling person like me is, of course, infrastructure. The trains are improving. The first time I came to Delhi airport, it was like a small provincial airport in Norway, in a small town. Well, now it's a world-class, large airport. Roads are much better. There's a lot more to be done. But there is a huge development on infrastructure. The recent years, because I'm very concerned with the environment, India's really turned. 10 years ago, the only conversation in India on the environment was, do we want to develop or do we want to take care of Mother Earth? And of course, nearly everyone, as everywhere else, wanted to develop. But now with Prime Minister Modi, it's completely changed into a conversation of how can India develop and go green at the same time, basing the future development on solar energy, on wind energy, hydropower, electric cars and mobility. Delhi now has the highest number of electric buses anywhere outside China. So there is so much happening on the environmental front.
So when you look at, what India has transformed over the last, I would say 30 years since 1991, since liberalization, but particularly in the last 10 years, with Prime Minister's vision about where he wants to see India go, and then this whole thing about Hinduism and renunciation and asceticism, importance for nature. Do you see, in the last 10 years, India being able to be an example to the rest of the world as to how you can modernize on the one hand, and you have to modernize on the one hand, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that, you throw the environment under the bus?
Let me give you one very practical example in an area where India is far superior to Europe and America. And that is the attitude to animals. It may look like a small issue, but I think it comes from the Hindu Dharma. In my nation, Norway, we have no animals which are dangerous for humans, except some polar bears up in the ice, but nothing else. Well, India do have tigers are killing humans in India every year. I think it's about 60. Elephants are killing a lot more. If an elephant or a tiger in India is killing a human, it will normally be replaced, put into a new habitat, into a new natural reserve where it can do no harm to humans. In Europe, where we don't have animals which are dangerous to humans, we kill every wolf which is killing a sheep, because that's seen as unacceptable, and we send government armed guards to kill the sheep. So this respect for animals taken into a modern time, where of course there are animal-human conflicts. I mean, there is no doubt. I mean, an elephant can destroy whatever a farmer has built in one night. A tiger can make havoc for a village if it's in the front line close to the forest. So this must be handled, but it's handled with a much more care and respect in India than we do in Europe or in North America.
So let me come, since you mentioned North America, it's a pretty tumultuous time in the world right now. Donald Trump is president again. He's withdrawn from the Paris Climate Accord. He's withdrawn from the WHO. It is completely disrupting politics as we know it. How does the world sort of prepare for this? How does the world react to this?
I think some nations are pretty well prepared. I think China is pretty well prepared because they've expected him to mainly go after China with trade barriers, and they have expected that, and they have a strong capacity to hit back, because it's much more difficult for, say, small developing nations in Asia or Africa. How can they really hit back? But I'm sorry to say, when it comes to trade, the only answer Trump will understand and respect is you hit back. That's what the Canadians and the Mexicans are now doing. They are putting the same tariffs on American export to their nation as Trump is putting the other way. If you don't do that, it will just invite new measures. And look, this trade thing is, I mean, Trump has caused some points. I mean, he wants to stop the import of drugs to America. That's a very, very fair point. Everyone should assist him in making sure that no more harm to the people of Ohio or Michigan from these horrible drugs. That should be respected. But that's, of course, just an excuse for his tariff policies, which are harmful to everyone. It will make everyone poorer, including the Americans.
So he's got this idea of putting tariffs, and he's done that already with Canada and Mexico. He's done that with China. He's threatening that with the BRICS nations. And obviously, those countries are not going to sit back and do nothing, right? Like Canada has now imposed retaliatory tariffs. But where does that end? Like, how does that whole thing play out? Because it's going to be bad for Canadians. It's going to be bad for Americans. It's going to be bad for Mexicans. And eventually, it's just going to be bad for the rest of the world.
If it continues and escalates, it's a race to the bottom.
Exactly.
It will make everyone poorer, and maybe those who will suffer the most are the people he claimed to want to help, which is the working class and the lower middle class in America itself. Everything will be more expensive for them, and they will not be able to reclaim the jobs. It's not like the United States is prepared to make the, say, iPhones or the Apple products in America. They can't. They have to import it, and if they go into these trade wars, these exporting companies from America will suffer, and the average American will suffer. But other people also suffer. It's bad for everyone.
So vis-a-vis Europe, he has a couple of things that are his pet peeves. One, he wants Europe to raise its defense budgets, NATO to contribute more to the defense budget. He wants to end the wars in Ukraine as well as in Gaza. First of all, you think he'll be able to do that? And two, what the cost might be for how he wants to end these two wars?
At this very early stage, let us also give him credit where he may deserve some credit. He may be able to find a solution to the war in Ukraine. That should be applauded by everyone, because in Europe there is a lot of skepticism. But if anyone in Europe could argue that Ukraine would be in better negotiating positions 2 years down the line, well, it may be worth fighting 2 more years. But there is no argument, not a real argument, that Ukraine will be in a better position 2 years down the line. So please start making peace now. And if he can put pressure both on Putin and the Ukrainians to make peace now, that should be applauded by the world. People should not be scared of that. And the other positive thing is that he doesn't seem to be as aggressive in every other corner of the world. The idea in Washington that there should be a Washington view on everything. I mean, the European Union last year, that's very much in line with it, made a resolution of the situation in the Indian state of Manipur. How many people in the European Parliament do you think could pinpoint Manipur on a map?
Yep.
Maybe one or two. So this is an arrogance where every islet in the Pacific, every small conflict everywhere in the world demands American intervention. Trump may withdraw from that, and that will be a blessing for the world. But of course, his aggressiveness on other issues, his constant lying, is an affront to the world, withdrawing from the World Health Organization, which of course we are so dependent on, because no disease is following borders, withdrawing from the climate action. All this is bad, but at this early stage, let's still accept that he has some good points and many bad.
Let me come back to the Ukraine part, right? So he's very clear he wants to cut a deal between Putin and Zelensky, and whatever deal currently you can think of necessarily involves Ukraine giving up about 20, maybe 25% of the territory that it had. Tell me, why would the Ukrainians accept such a deal? Why would the Ukrainians accept something which says, no NATO membership, no talk about NATO membership, no talk about any security guarantees from NATO? That may be acceptable to Putin, may be acceptable to Trump, but why would the Ukrainians, why would the Europeans accept that?
I think these two are a little separate. Accepting that Ukraine should not be part of NATO, to me, is just common sense. Ukraine is a border state between Europe and Russia. And should remain as such, a buffer state with a very good relationship both to Russia and to Europe. And even before the war, NATO didn't really invite Ukraine into NATO. It was just a lot of talk. There was no reality into that. So I think that's on the easy side. A deal would demand some kind of security guarantees for Ukraine, maybe underwritten by India and China and nations in the global south also, with Europe to give them more credibility. The issue of sovereignty of territory is, of course, very, very difficult. We are in a very bad place in the world if you can grab territory from another nation. Of course, the Israelis have grabbed Palestine from the Palestinians, which is completely unacceptable. But for Ukraine to give up the eastern part of the land will be a very difficult issue. Maybe the solution will be something like in Korea. You give no guarantees for the future. You are not giving it up, but you accept a status quo along the present line between the two military forces.
Some kind of an armistice,
yes,
like we see on
which
on
makes
the
it possible
Peninsula.
for Ukraine in the future to claim this land. There may be different political situation in the future, maybe new leaders in Russia, no one knows, but it may be possible in 10 or 50 years to reclaim it. But at the current, it will be peace along the armistice line. I mean, no one, I think, expect Russia to withdraw to the early line. Yeah.
What about in Gaza?
Yeah, I mean, still no one has come up with any other formula than a two-state solution. The amount of Jews and the amount of Palestinians in the area is more or less the same. Population rise is higher among Palestinians, so in future it will be equal. There's no way you can continue with a democratic Jewish state, which is like an apartheid state where there are no real rights for Christians or Muslims or Palestinians.
Did you think that Trump and Netanyahu want a two-state solution?
Absolutely no. And Netanyahu, no.
So
Trump, I don't think, are very interested in the details of any other country outside the United States. He wants to shine on the international scene. He wants America to be strong, but I don't think he's very much interested in any details.
So what might be the solution to end the war? Like, you give up the hostages, let's end the war, and both parties continue as it was before the 7th of October 2023?
I know no one who have an immediate solution to the situation in Gaza. I can see only it must get some time. Peace is nearly always better than wars, and so many people have been unnecessarily killed. Of course, the vast majority of them got Palestinians from Gaza, but also Israelis. And then again start the work for a two-state solution where Palestinians have a state in the West Bank and Gaza. It's very difficult. It will take time.
Trump also wants Greenland. What about that? I mean, Denmark seems to think that's an absurd idea. I know the Danish Prime Minister was recently in Paris and Berlin and rallying support in Europe. Why do you think he wants it, and do you think he can get it?
I think he simply wants it because he will go into history as a great American president if he increased the territory with 3 million square kilometers. The two arguments which have been made that this is important for military security, of course not. The Americans already have a military base there. If they ask for 2 or 3 more bases, they would get it. And the main competitors of the United States, like China, is not really interested up in there. I mean, come very, very low on the priority list of Xi Jinping to have an interest in Greenland. And the other argument that there are a lot of resources there. Yes, potentially there are, but they are very hard and very expensive to develop, and that's why it hasn't been developed. If the resources were easily up
So why do you think he wants it?
I think he wants to be grand, to be big, to be a man who do big things for America. At the end of the day, he may also help the Greenlanders who want independence, because they maybe have a stronger case for independence if they can work more with the United States, of course at the same time more with China and India and other nations. They are very much have been very much dependent on economic subsidies from Denmark. But if the importance of these subsidies in the economy comes down in Greenland, I think it's pretty clear that the vast majority of Greenlanders want not to be part of Denmark, nor to be in the US. They want to be an independent Greenland.
So how does Denmark, how does France, how does Germany and Britain respond to that? Trump has said he will acquire it by military or economic means or whatever means is available.
The Danes are very concerned. The Danish Prime Minister had a long conversation with President Trump, which obviously gave her a lot of... She was scared. She was very scared. Mm-hmm. Still, it's hard to think that he will use military means. If he use military means against a NATO ally, means NATO is dead. Yeah. How can NATO survive that? Mm-hmm. To be a complete reconfiguration of European politics. Added, of course, it will give an argument to every nation in the world that they can acquire neighbors by military means if they so wish. Africa, there are 54 states in Africa. Hardly any of the borders are following mountain ranges or rivers or any clear geographical consequence. It's basic, and very many places tribes are divided, one part in one state and another in another. There's any number of arguments for changing the borders in Africa. If the most powerful nation in the world at will can change borders, why wouldn't basically every state leader in Africa look to change borders?
And finally, if Trump were to cut a deal with Putin, as he wants to end the Ukraine war, how would folks in your country, Norway, react to that?
I have to say, sorry to say, there is a divide here between the foreign policy elite and top politicians and the majority of the people. I think there is now a strong surge among the average Europeans for peace. People want this war to end, but they of course don't want it to end on humiliating terms for Ukraine, but they want the war to end. They don't want to pay that much. They don't want to see all this suffering, so they want the war to end. While among the elite, there are more people who think we should fight to the last Ukrainians.
And finally, the need amongst average Norwegians, average Swedes, to join NATO. They've traditionally been neutral countries since this war began. You think Sweden and Norway will eventually become a part of NATO?
Norway has been a part of NATO from the very beginning. Sweden just joined. There is no doubt people were scared of the Russian attack and aggression against Ukraine, and the feeling was that if we can take Ukraine, what will be the next? To me, I think we need a bit calmer analysis of Mr. Putin. He is not Hitler. He is not aiming for world dominance. He's not there to wipe out and kill ethnic groups like Hitler killed the Jews or even the Ukrainians and others. But it's more like the old Tsars, a power politician who want to be strong and grand and make Russia very, very powerful with basically any means. So if you are in some of the smaller neighboring states to Russia, of course it's understandable that people are scared, but there is no feeling of threat to my nation Norway or to Germany or France. That's also maybe why there is a very strong peace sentiment. The Germans and the French don't feel threatened directly by Putin, even if they have sympathy for the cause of the Ukrainians.
All right, Mr. Solheim, thank you very much for joining us here on CNN News 18. Pleasure speaking with you.
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.